Welcome to Hustle to Harmony. Today's guest is Thomas McMinn. He's the founder of Dadhood.co. He's a men's coach and a powerful voice for modern fatherhood. After realizing that being a dad didn't feel the way he expected, Thomas went on a journey to redefine what it means to lead, love, and show up fully as a father. Now, through his coaching, community, and raw storytelling, he helps men shed outdated roles, embrace emotional honesty, and build deep, connected relationships with their families, all without losing themselves in the process. If you're ready to challenge the hustle culture, rethink masculinity, and explore what real presence looks like as a man and a father, this is a conversation you don't want to miss.
I don't know if I ever told you, when I was 18, I was actually sitting down, not only with the recruiter, I went through all the physical exams, like MEPS and everything, to be a Navy SEAL. And
No
I
way.
passed their physical exam to get a spot to test to get in. So when you see buds, you have to do a pre-qualifying test to even get to buds, which then buds drops the other 85% or whatever or more.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
so that was one of those tests. I remember being told that it's basically waterboarding. It's keeping you calm in the most stressful situation, and it's terrifying, right? When you can't breathe, we go straight into panic mode. And when we go into panic mode like that, the probability of us giving up increases exponentially, right? So they're doing that because they want to weed out people that get into terrified positions like that. They want to weed you out because the rest of the team depends on you. And if you break down under that immense stress, they want to know that going into combat situations. So
That's kind of like they should have that for being a father.
Right?
You're kind of going into a combat situation,
Right.
and I think it's a beautiful segue. I've known you for a while, and we've kind of been chatting for a couple of years, and have yet to meet face to face, but that day's coming and everything. And I remember you told me once that becoming a dad didn't feel like you thought it would. It kind of felt, I don't know why I remember that, just stuck out of my mind, and because I think I felt the same way, but then I started watching you do your thing with Dadhood, and I guess the first official question I want to ask you is go back to the moment you really came up with Dadhood. What was that feeling like? What was the initial vision? What was why were you creating it in that moment? What was going on?
Yeah, so even taking a step all the way back before Dadhood, it started off as Car Seats and Coffee, and I believe that's where you and I first met, on Car Seats and Coffee, and that was when I was working full time for the local state here in Utah, and life was just moving so fast, and I was constantly feeling lack of energy because I had 2 kids in car seats at that time, and so much was going on, and I was genuinely sitting there in the parking lot, Kevin. I have a Venti Starbucks in my hand, and I look up in my rearview mirror, and I'm like, what happened in my life? Where did everything just shifted? All the things that I thought were important shifted. All the things that I thought I knew about myself took a 180. I understood how to climb the corporate ladder. That was fine. You work, you do your performance reviews, you show up, you get your job done. I had no clue how to be a dad, right? And not even no clue how to be a dad. I didn't feel there was resources available for me. When I would look around, there's tons of mom blogs at the time. There was so many, even mom podcasts. There were websites dedicated, tons of books. And then you go to the dad section, and it's minuscule, right? And even the ones that I would review or listen to or read didn't really resonate with me. So it kind of went back to that old saying, if you're not seeing the world that you want, then you got to create it yourself. And I'm just paraphrasing all of that, right? But it became that point where I'm like, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to share this message. And if I get one dad that listens, awesome. And pretty much I did have the one dad.
I listened.
And it was you, Kevin.
I listened.
And as it progressed and changed, and finally at one point decided I was going to leave the corporate environment because I was not showing up as not only the dad I wanted to be, I wasn't showing up as the husband I wanted to be. I wasn't even showing up as the human I wanted myself to be. Very short fused, very agitated, like constantly in that stress, the fight or
Mm-hmm.
flight mode. And I, at that point, said, you know what? We've put away some funds, and I'm going to now transition the whole thing over to Dadhood. And I rebranded the whole thing, started the podcast completely over with knowing all the episodes I recorded before. And yeah, so now here we are today. And my mission with all of this is to teach emotional intelligence and also build communication skills between men and themselves and men and their families so that they can foster deep emotional relationships. Because at the end, I believe it's not going to be the things that I've acquired or the achievements I've earned in this life. It's going to be all my family when it comes down to the end that I'm going to think, man, did I show up enough for them? Did I create enough impact for them that they show up to the world different,
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
It's beautiful. That I totally forgot, like going all the way back to car seats and coffee. That was, I mean, that feels like a whole lifetime ago, but, and our kids, they don't feel like they're that much older, but they are from that moment, and, we've talked about this at length, as to how dads show up, and there's a stigma around like like the Al Bundy stigma. Everyone shows up like, duh, like,
Yeah.
I don't care about my wife. I don't care about my kids. Get out of my face. That's been on in entertainment for a long time, and I think that's a big misconception. I think the second biggest misconception is that dads don't want to get better. They don't want to be more attached to their wife or their kids or their partner. And obviously that's me from the 10,000 foot view, from where you sit, like, what is the biggest misconception about fatherhood that people might have? Like, where are we just not looking at it correctly?
Great question. Something I was actually unpacking a little bit today. I don't have a daughter, but I was watching this video and it was talking about the fact that dads today, they have the pressure of still protecting their daughter. And I feel the same way with my boys, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's across the board. But we've been told in society, like how men are supposed to be showing up, even now, right?
Yeah.
That you don't have an opinion about like maybe what your daughter or son wears. Like pretty much don't get involved with anything they're doing, but you still have to show up and protect them, right? And it led to this whole conversation that no, we still as men and still as fathers have to embrace all sides of us. But what we need to do ultimately is take some of that, what they call like that toxic masculinity. It's like,
Yeah.
it really comes back to this, Kevin, when I think of toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic. Toxic people are toxic, right?
That's a very
Like,
good point.
like
Yeah.
don't show up and be a bad person. Like that should just be the staple. That should be what
Yeah.
we all want. But being a masculine individual or a feminine male, like none of that is like a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. Like we need to
Mm-hmm.
accept all sides of ourselves. But what we need to do is just take the elements and the equations out that are like probably men making comments about women wearing the things they were. That was not the appropriate thing. It wasn't that him being a male, it was him running his mouth about an inappropriate thing. Like that's
Yeah.
the element we need to let go of, right? And I'm trying to show these, like, help these dads because ultimately we have to unpack our own stories. I'm realizing that too. You can't really guide anybody into changing, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
but hopefully you can ask them the right questions or foster the right space where they can emotionally open up and start identifying things that they realize the areas that maybe they didn't want to show up for their family or even themselves. Because I believe when we work on ourselves, and you and I have talked about this multiple times, when you really do that work, it impacts positively everybody around you.
Yeah.
And that's the hard work to do, right?
Yeah. It is. It is. one of my mentors, he told me, he said, he's got this real scraggly voice. He said, Kevin, you know the best way to change your marriage? I said, no. I said, what's the best way to change your marriage? He says, change yourself. And I was like, all right. And so, but as funny as that sounds, using the gravelly voice and all that, the gravelly voice, it's really true. That is the best way. And I think that's how you kind of approach dadhood, like you're not trying to change, and you make a good point, toxic is toxic, no matter what you attach to the end of it. We're all trying not to raise bad people, which means we all have to try to not be bad people ourselves. And the older my son gets, my son is 10 now, and the older he gets, the more I realize he's listening, but he's modeling 10 times more than he's listening. So it's not so much what dad says, it's what dad does that gets echoed. And that's equal parts flattering and terrifying, right? And I do think that the world has gotten, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s. I'm still growing, sure. Right? But there's this idea that the male was the dad, was the provider. And then I think we've evolved into this idea of the dad being present. So have you ever found yourself like in a moment where you were torn between these two identities that we're kind of thrust into? The minute your child is born, you immediately put on the provider jacket, and then you kind of go through life for a little bit, and then you realize, oh, wow, they're actually talking to me and conversing with me and emotionally connecting with me. And was there ever a time where you felt like torn between being a provider and being really present for your kids?
Yeah, I'm torn between that right now, Kevin. You and I, again, fortunately, we get to speak about a lot of topics, off camera before, but going through this stage where I know there's a need for dadhood, and I know there's a need to keep pushing, but dadhood is also not providing the same way that the 9-to-5 provided for before, right? So having this torn where dadhood gives me way more opportunities to be at all their sporting events, to take them to school, to show up and, jump on the trampoline with them after school and do all these things, where I know that if I was in that 9-to-5 again, it's going to be limited. But I'm torn because there's two sides. There's this traditional providing side, the narrative that or at least I grew up believing that my job is to keep them safe, keep food on the table, keep a roof over their head, provide the needs financially. It wasn't about keeping them safe emotionally. It was keeping them safe physically, right? And being torn between that now and realizing that I could go back and grind it all out, right? And I can miss these moments, and it's a very small window, very small window. I can miss these moments, and they will have a similar experience that I had growing up. And I asked this question the other day of why do dads keep using the excuse of, my dad did the best he could. My dad did the best he could. We hear that all the time. He did the best he could. But what I'm hearing, and maybe because I'm working more on my own emotional intelligence, is I'm hearing pain and frustration and disappointment behind that statement. Because they didn't show up for you the way you were wanting them to show up for you. So now, knowing that, it's an opportunity for dads to say, well, what would that have looked like? And what am I willing to do so that my kid doesn't have to sit in therapy later and tell his therapist, like, hey, my dad did the best he could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's a good point. And I think I've definitely said that, and I have a great relationship with my father today. We've definitely had ups and downs, but I think we look at it like, and I have this thing I say in business where good enough is not good enough. You know what I mean? And what that means is it has nothing to do with perfectionism or anything like that. It has to do with potential. Do you have the potential to be masterful at something, or do you have the potential to be outstanding? Do you have the potential to do those things? And it's so funny because I had a conversation with my coach today, And I was telling him, I said, I'm leaving my job feeling exhausted. And he was like, why? Are you moving rocks? What are you building? What are you doing? I said, no, I sit at this desk. And he was like, so, but what we realized was that was trained because my dad used to come home and be like, oh, I'm beat. I've had a long day. And it was, it was even that's such a small thing that's so innocent. It didn't mean he wasn't trying to shape my opinion of work. It was just, he probably felt tired. He probably did, but, and then you talk about, well, my dad was just doing the best he could. Translate that into current times. And it's like, my dad's best would be like a deadbeat dad in today's world, right? Because he goes to work, provides for the family, comes home, rests, goes to work, provides for the family. There's no extracurricular. And I think that's what you're kind of talking about is how we've evolved. That there's constant effort in being what our kids need us to be, but also what our wives, our partners want us to be. What the people watching at the mall or at the movies, what they think we should be. You're out in public, and you talk pretty in depth about vulnerability, especially when it comes to your kids and things like that. How did you arrive in vulnerability and the emotional intelligence and things like that being the thing you were going to kind of make a cornerstone of dadhood? Like why are those things so important in your opinion to fathers?
I think we want to follow the things that we're naturally either drawn to or we believe we have a natural skill set for certain things, right? And my undergrad, I studied interpersonal communication, which is all about those.
Hold on, wait a minute. So did I. That's what my degree's in.
Right?
We might be related in a deeper way than we understand.
Yeah, I still think there's a possibility we're brothers somehow. I don't know. We'll figure that out. 23andMe, we'll figure it out one of these.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
So like even going back to that, so right? And from listeners, building those interpersonal relationships and the communication is getting beyond, I really believe, getting beyond the surface level. And the emotional intelligence, I'll just come out. I feel like I'm a more emotionally driven guy. I feel a lot, I'm the dude that if I'm watching the movie and everybody's failing, like I'm like feeling for them. Like my heart's just bursting open, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want everybody to be good. And so I realized that in itself needed to be unpacked. Like I can't take on everybody else's emotions, and like how are certain ways that I could become more emotionally intelligent. And when I start implementing these things that I'm not only studying, but I'm talking to other dads about, I'm starting to show up for my boys in a different way. Where I used to lose my temper when my boys would speak back to me, now I can take a 5-second break, or I can, take a deep breath, or I can be empathetic and realize this has nothing to do with me at all. They also are going to school all day and probably are hungry and they have sporting activities. And just being able to step out of the situation and review those things from a deeper level and not allow our emotions to kick in so fast. Because the interesting thing, I just found this out the other day, actually, an emotional reaction is a chemical burst that happens in the brain and moves directly to the body. And that's why you have the feelings, right? And when you can sit for 90 seconds and accept that feeling, 9 out of 10 times that it completely goes away after 90 seconds. But we react so fast, right? I'm triggered, boom, I spit right back out because the feeling is a memory that's locked in our cells of how either we were treated or we're used to responding. So it becomes that subconscious level where you're just acting without allowing that emotion to actually sit there with you. And more times than not, it's not the best response, right?
Yeah.
And so sitting there and being able to even count. Sometimes I've had to force, or I'm training myself to, if I can't in that moment kind of like maybe turn around and not look at my kids in the eyes, or just do something where I can break that moment. Just 90 seconds. If I can break it for 90 seconds, I know I'm going to respond so much more calm. If I even want to respond at all. Sometimes now I'm just like, just let that go. Because 90 seconds later in their little bodies, they're not even thinking about the same thing either.
Right. I think that's the emotional intelligence we're talking about. And I think that's the attitude we're up against, is that, dads act swiftly, they act emotionally, they act brashly, don't mess with dad. Dad's strict, all these things. And what I think what we're seeing now, especially through you and the work you do, is that dads are sitting down having a calm, rational, emotional conversation with their kids and talking about feelings and talking about decisions and talking about that, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned from you, is to not just talk about, oh, son, how'd that make you feel? Talk about how it made me feel. Tell him how I felt, right? And that models the behavior, and I know you and I talk quite a bit about this off recording. One of the biggest failures I've ever had as a dad, it's burned in my memory, but I'm at a point now where it's not scarring, it's just a general reminder at this point. But for a long time, it was scarring. When my son was in treatment, I lost my cool with him and I raised my voice. And then I looked at this little bald kid and was like, what the hell am I doing? Like this. And he looked at me and just started crying, and I felt terrible. But not to my defense, but that was a big failure because I wasn't handling my emotions. I didn't wait the 90 seconds. Right. Is there a time in your life where, any kind of dad failure really stands out, and how do you move past that?
Oh man. How long do we have on this episode?
Right.
Well,
We
like
could just
I want
swap
to throw this out here. Like, I am so far from a perfect father. I'm working on this while I unpack it with different guests and everything. Just as much it's benefiting me as I feel of any possible benefit I'm giving back out, because we don't know all the answers, right? And I would say, man, I have lost my temper with my kids before so many times. Here's a great story. So I'm up sleeping. It's Saturday morning, and I just hear pots and pans and who the hell knows what else is going on downstairs, like ding ding ding, and I get triggered that I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's going to be a mess, my house might catch on fire, like all these things are going through my mind. I go downstairs, and my son has the KitchenAid mixer out. He's got like the ovens going. He's cooking eggs. He's 10, dude. Okay. He's down here like Chef Ramsay, like making I don't even know what. And all I'm seeing is genuinely, I'm seeing red. I'm like, this is because I know historically I would be the one cleaning it all up, right?
Right.
Instead of being able to sit back in that moment. And I did overreact in that moment. Fortunately, the recovery was later on in the evening when I was in a more calm state of mind, and I was able to actually look at it and be like, wow, my son's down here cooking meals at 10 years old. Like, how incredible is that? To be able to go in and express to him and look him in his eyes and say, bud, I don't need you to accept my apology right now. But I do want you to hear me when I say to you, I am so sorry for overreacting. That was on Dad. That had nothing to do with you. What you were doing is incredible. I'm so impressed by the way that you can figure out how to cook yourself breakfast in the morning and even cook it for your little brother. I think that was such an amazing thing. And again, I am so sorry. Dad was in a stressful state. And again, that had nothing to do with you. And I just want you to hear me on that. And dude, once that moment clicked in, I realized, okay, that's vulnerability from a dad's standpoint. You have to open up, you have to be raw, and you have to understand that they do not need to accept your apology. But you being the one that they look up to as their guide, you need to make it right. You need them to understand that's not on them. That was you having a moment where you didn't control your emotions. That didn't have anything to do with them.
Ooh, that's powerful. That's powerful. I think that approach, I've never heard that before. You've probably said it to me, but I'm hearing it now for the first time, where I don't need you to accept my apology, but I need you to hear the words because they're genuine. To a 10-year-old, I didn't get that. Again, different era. I got, well, if you hadn't have been down here making so much noise, you wouldn't have gotten the earful.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful transition. That's a powerful, yeah, I think they learn from that. They learn, we're teaching young men, in our case, we've got sons, we're teaching young men how to treat their future wives. We're teaching them how to treat their friends. We're teaching them how to treat their colleagues in business, and it's not just, dads of boys, it's dads of girls. You're teaching your daughter what a husband looks like, or what a mother looks like, or how a relationship works, or and I think that's one of the things my wife and I've been really conscious about, is not hiding the arguments, just being calculated in how we fight. When we argue, we're not name calling, we're not yelling, we're not raising our voice, and we're actually including my son if he and normally he's like, I'm out of here, you guys hash it out. He's not crazy, but I think that's it. And I think when we look at the flip side of the coin, there's probably other instances where your son was incorrect in behavior, and because that's how kids do. So is there, we have a lot of controversy now around discipline, especially with kids under a certain age, and what do you do? Is it timeout? Of course, spanking's been part of my life my teachers used to spank me in school. Like it was just part of the culture. Now it's not so much anymore. So is there a way that you discipline that you feel good about? Is there, I don't want to say a favorite way to discipline, but when you have to discipline, is there your go-to means that kind of make your point and still embrace this emotional intelligence and vulnerability aspect?
Yeah, I'm working on moving more towards natural consequences. A great example would be this. We're in the car and my son says maybe something inappropriate to his mom, right? Yeah. I don't believe that that's okay in my world. And I want to demonstrate, as you were saying, the way that a man should speak to their partner, right? And so in those moments, I will express to him, hey, bud, listen, not only the way that you're speaking to your mom is not appropriate, it makes me feel this way when you speak to your mom. And I need you to understand that the way that I'm going to react to you now and why I'm raising maybe my voice is because you upset the way that I heard anybody. And I said, if this was anybody speaking to your mom this way, I would react the same way. Because I need him to first understand where my emotional state is coming from.
Right.
Because if he doesn't understand, he's like, oh, dad's flipping out again. Right? Oh, dad's so mad. And they tune out. Yeah. But if I look at him, and I've done this before, Kevin, there's been a couple times that's been so intense that, dude, I've had moments where my eyes are watering up and I'm just feeling so sad about maybe what was either said or the lack of understanding. A great example of that was one time we were sitting at the table and they're having a fundraiser come up at school, and you could give all the canned items that you could to the school for the fundraiser drive, right? And I was like, hey, boys, load up this bag, whatever you want. And they go to the back of the pantry and they start grabbing the crappy beans. They start grabbing the corn, all the things. And I said to him, I said, bud, why aren't you grabbing the stuff that you would want to eat? He's like, well, I'm not going to give him the stuff I'd want, Dad. And I looked at him and I said, here's a thing, bud, that I want you to know. Because his mom and I, especially his mom grew up in harder financial time. And I said, there are some kids that would be so excited to have that good stuff. And the thing is, they can't go to their pantry and grab that anytime they want like you. So I would rather give them everything, because the reality is we fortunately can go to the store and replace this. And dude, like I said, my eyes were watering up. I was just feeling it. And he's like, "What's wrong, Dad?" And I said, "It makes me so sad that any kid has to sit here and can't go to his pantry and grab the food that he wants or she wants. That breaks my heart, bro." And man, the moments, and you can see it, Kevin, you can really see it, that you don't have to say anything else in that moment.
Yeah.
Because I usually overspeak. I will be in an emotional state and I just start vomiting words out like, "You need to understand everything I'm feeling." But again, going back to that EQ, if you can look at an individual and you can see the shift, sometimes the best thing to do at that moment is just let it go and let it be.
Yeah. That's powerful. What a lesson. What a lesson.
Hmm.
That's how you raise a good human, in my opinion. It's not. I think there's this underlying culture that says you should be better than everybody else, win the game of life at all costs. Be the best, be the best, be the best, do more. There's that underlying tone. You see it in kids' sports. You see it in school as far as grades go. There's a lot of comparison. There's a lot of this and that. And there is an element of claim what you want out of life. I teach that in my work, but I think there's also this thing that you just taught that was, why are you going to only give away the things you don't want when someone else has nothing? You want to be a true human. You want to really not be toxic. Those people give away the things they do want because it will help someone else. That's an incredible lesson. I think you should probably teach that to adults if you can. There's probably a lot of lessons in there that adults need to hear.
Do you mind if I share one other story that just recently happened?
Yeah, I'd love that.
We were driving back from Taekwondo, and I believe this is the one good thing where I can show vulnerability. Taekwondo, I can also show them my physical strength and my mental grit, right? But we were coming back from Taekwondo. The whole family's in their dobokes, which is, if for everybody that doesn't know, that's your uniform in Taekwondo. And there's a car that's in the straight lane. We're going to turn to our house, and it has its flashers on, and then maybe probably 40 feet away is another car with its flashers on. No one in between, and it's dark and it's later at night. And I said, "Oh man, if you guys weren't in the car right now, I would have stopped and made sure they're okay." Dude, you want to know what my son hit me with, bro? And it was oh my gosh. He's like, "Why do you need us not to be in the car for you to do a good thing, Dad?"
My goodness.
Oh,
my goodness.
It's still hitting me. When I think about that, it still hit me. I was like, how many times am I wanting to show up one way, and because my family's there, or because a friend's there, or because something, I don't take that same opportunity, though, even though inside my heart saying, "Do this." I don't in that moment. So
yeah. Looks like you've already raised a good human. He's asking powerful questions. And I think that's the hardest part about, I consider you a great dad. And I think the hardest part about being a great dad is when your lessons come back at you. Right. And I think that's an illustration. You taught that to him at some point. Why do you need this circumstance, this scenario to be perfect for you to make a right decision?
Yeah.
And he threw it back at you, and it was like, I love that you did that. I also don't feel comfortable that you did that, but I love that you did that. And that's that. I think that's the hardest part about getting parenthood right, is that you can no longer hide. You have to be the lesson. You can't just talk the lesson. You have to actually be the lesson. And because the kids grow up, and as the kids get older, they start calling you out, and they start saying, "Hey, yeah, but you talk to mom like that." Right? Or, "Yeah, but you did that." Or, "Yeah, but you drank too many sodas on Friday." And I think that's the beautiful part of it, is we're growing just as much as they are, it seems.
Oh, in that moment when he said that, and to your point, feeling that discomfort, because it
Yeah.
did. It triggered something
Oh, I bet.
inside.
I bet.
That's now the work.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm trying to shed more light in the videos or the content I'm putting out. That's where the work
Mm-hmm.
begins, because now there's something inside emotionally and mentally that I haven't processed fully.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to show up and really want to show up, because you have to want it, and be that guy that now does stop when the family's in the car, then there's some work I need to do to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like they're raising us on some level as well.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. It
Yeah.
really is. Um, this is not an easy segue. It's not a smooth transition, but we're going to make a leap because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this because, it's something that we all deal with. When we talk about it's okay to be a good dad, but the truth of the matter is there's a ton of influence in the world on our kids. Um, Same with moms, so we're not excluding the moms. It's just we happen to be two dads. So that's what we talk about. But, how do you handle, my son's very much into gaming, very much into YouTube. We're going to see the Minecraft movie later tonight. He's excited about whatever chicken jockey or whatever that thing is,
Yeah.
So how do you handle the digital influence um, on your kids and how does it ever contradict your guidance, your teachings? Like
Yeah.
what's your theory on that? How do you navigate it? How do you mitigate negative things creeping in?
Dude, oh my gosh, what a great question. I wish I knew or even had a phenomenal answer to give. Uh, one thing I have been working on, Kevin, is because my son comes up constantly, "Hey Dad, can I see your phone?" And I'll ask him, like, "What are you going to look up?" Like, "Oh, I want to look something up on Amazon, or I want to look up, this video or something."
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, "Yeah, go for it." Other times I'm like, "No, bud, we have to go." You have to understand the reality that these things can suck you in, and all time and everything goes away. And there's responsibilities. One thing I'm noticing, no matter how much I learn and no matter
Mm-hmm.
how much I try, my boys will still be doing things that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can do to combat that, because it scares the crap out of me, Kevin, like
Mm-hmm.
the access to like pornography, violence, like all these, like on your smart devices, is in a second. You can go
Second.
anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only way I can combat is by showing up and trying to lead as an example and having real conversations with them. I have to talk to my 10-year-olds now about some of these things. "Hey bud, have you seen anything like on the phone or in YouTube that's made you kind of feel a little weird inside?" "No, Dad." Or, "Yeah, I saw something scary," instead of being like, What was it? What was it?"
Right.
Jumping down. I'm like, "Oh, so
Yeah.
yeah, so like tell me more about that." Open it up. Let them
Yeah.
share, dude, without responding. That is the biggest challenge, without responding, because it went right back to, I do remember one thing my dad said. He's like, "Bud, I know you're probably out having some drinks," and this is before I was old enough to have alcohol. He's like, "I know you're having some drinks and you're going out in high school with your friends and whatever." He's like, "If you have drinks and you feel like you need to get home," he's like, "please call me. I won't ask any questions. I'll just pick you up and we'll figure
Mm-hmm.
it out from there. We won't even talk. We'll talk about it the next day or whatever." It's the
Yeah.
same. We have to show up in this digital landscape, I believe, in a similar model. We have to say, if you happen to see something that makes you feel a certain way, like, chat with me, chat with me. And then when they do, because you get one chance,
Yeah.
you get one chance, and they tell you, "I saw something inappropriate or something scared me," and you respond or react at a 10, it's over. It's
It's
over, dude.
over.
They will not come to you again and do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So reminding myself, especially now, because they are getting and they're going to friends' houses on Saturday and and they're out playing, and it's like I can't
Yeah.
control everything they see anymore, Kevin. So I am just reminding them that if you feel a certain way, it might be something in your body telling you that that's not right for you, and trying to empower them to make the right decisions,
Yeah.
because ooh, we've seen it, man. We've seen that world, and some of the things even now, like I want to respond. I'm watching them watch these shorts on like Saturday morning, and I'm like, this is the most ridiculous, asinine thing I've ever seen. Why are they laughing so hard? You know?
Yeah.
And I want to say that, like, this is like our parents, like Simpsons and all this, like, oh, you can't, you know what I mean? You can't watch this rubbish and it's bad.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm just trying to be more curious, trying to show up a little more curious for them, and just be like, man, if I was 10 years old again and watching this stuff, would I be laughing? Probably. But like, explain to me why you find this stuff funny, and tell me more about why you follow, Mr. Beast, or, whatever you're watching. And some of the stuff I watch and I'm impressed too. I'm like, oh, that stuff's awesome. Right.
Yeah.
Like some of these science things they watch, I'm like, that's awesome. Like some of this content. So it's not all bad. There's a lot out there that's actually really good. And I think we just have to, at a certain degree, trust that we've done enough work with them that they're going to make the right choice. And if they don't, again, there's natural consequences, Kevin, that unfortunately we can't protect them from everything.
Yeah.
But I know that once they start becoming teenagers, and like I said, that the pornography conversation and all that, I'm going to be straight up with them. Be like, this is not reality, bro. You can think about it, like it's going to make you feel certain things. You can do all this. This is not only one, not reality. Two, like, you ever try to treat a woman like this, like, it's here's the reality, dude. Like, and just, but you've got to make these choices, man. I can't sit there and monitor 24/7 your phone because I'm trying to hold down the foundation of the family too,
Yeah, right.
And I mean, obviously there's certain parental things that we can set up, but dude, kids are so smart, and kids are like, dude, and now integrating all the AI stuff and just all of that, it's like they can do things that you will have no clue. And it's like, if we can build the foundation, though, I think that's, from a personal level, that's my biggest chance of combating some of that. And, when they play games and stuff, I tell them certain games, like, no, you're not turning on the chat functionality. I'm sorry. And you can be mad at me. Cool. Be mad at me. I don't care. But I also know that there's people on there that don't have good intentions. Right. And so, and the dialogue and stuff, maybe they're saying this stuff at school, but in my house, they're not going to speak like that to their mom or to, each other, or even to me. So, setting some of those guidelines. And I even express to them, because it makes it, while I'm saying this, I remember playing Call of Duty and playing this as an adult, like Katie and I were married, like we are like starting, like we have a mortgage and everything. And I remember at night coming home from work, and I would sit and have a couple of drinks and play this game, and I'm chatting with strangers and getting very aggressive, and the content you're consuming is very aggressive. And I had a conversation one day with Katie. She's like, I am never going to tell you to not play your game. I'm never going to tell you to get rid of anything. But I have been noticing it's transitioning into other areas of your life. Like, for example, while driving down the street, all of a sudden I'd be cursing somebody out when that wasn't my like natural go-to, right? That's not my default. So knowing that as an adult mind, I'm like, it gives me a little insight to tell the boys that too. Like, I need you guys to know, even dad at his age, if he played those games enough, dad's mind can't even process that.
Right.
And that's why I'm telling you this. And you can be upset at me, but it's not going to happen right now. And I hope that if you go to your friend's house and they're playing it, I hope that you understand enough that that's not what you should be doing right now. And if not, I can't control it. You got to make that choice, bud.
It's amazing. That, I think that's the one thing with being a dad or being a parent in general, that there's no certain way to handle. It's kind of, everybody's got to handle it their own way. Kids are their own people. They're human beings. They've got their own thoughts, their own intentions, their own DNA. And I tell my son that all the time. I'll say things like, this is not a punishment. Like, I'm not taking that as a punishment. And he will say, it feels like a punishment, and that could be him just trying to manipulate me. Totally. But it's also that, and then on the flip side of that is, we game together. Sometimes he likes sports games, loves football. So we play Madden football on the Xbox and stuff like that. And then I am tested because we had this one time, it was early on, and I used to game as a kid, but I haven't really done it too much as an adult. But I was like, hey, I'm going to get back into it. There's be time with my son. And we sit down to play Madden. And first game, he beats me 144 to nothing. Like, I was getting pissed. I was like having to not be like, and I was like in this sort of dilemma of, I want him to play his full, like, I want him to play to his potential. I don't want him to like take it easy on me, but I also don't want him to beat me 144 to nothing. Let dad score, for God's sakes,
Yeah.
So I do think there's that element too, where we have to walk that talk. And, if looking at this little magic box, if we're constantly have our nose in that, and then we look at them and say, go take a break, go outside, that's called hypocrisy.
Yeah. Like at dinner, there's no phones at my dinner table.
Yeah.
And that's like Katie and I setting that example, because the boys don't have it. They have their little watches, right?
Right.
But like we don't do that. Like, we're here, we're trying to be a family, we're trying to enjoy that. And they might think it's ridiculous and whatever. But at some point, I know down the road, they'll look back and be like, we sat down as a family and had dinner together.
Yeah.
And my dad and mom weren't on their phone. They were asking us questions.
Yeah.
We were laughing together. We were upset sometimes, like all the emotions,
Yeah.
And it's so funny, because back to your story with Matt, and I had genuinely, I'm not getting the exact same experience. And I was so humbled and upset at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I used to destroy at video games, and my 7-year-old just crushed me, dude.
Yeah.
And now I like play every once in a while with them, but I'm like, this is crazy. The way they process stuff is just, it's very different. It's very fast.
It is.
It
is. I was playing my hardest that day too. I was like, come on. And I didn't pick it up the way he did, but we kept. I think also the lesson was I kept playing with him. I didn't not play, and I got better a little bit. He still beats me, but not as bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's we talk about dads that just try your best, just do your best. And I think there is that element, but also it's like, you've got to do better than your best sometimes. And you've got to really show the defeat, show the failure, and show how you respond to those things. How are you a good loser? Because we can't all win.
Yeah.
And I think there's some dads that are, that's really bad to say, but it's true. There's some dads that are pretending to be winners all the time. Yeah. And I see it in their kids, where now the expectation is that we win. So the only way I can make dad proud is if I win. And they never see dad sad or hurt or losing or wrong or apologizing. And subliminally, subconsciously, what we're doing is we're saying the only way you can make dad proud is if you're never wrong. And so we can raise people to think, I have to fight for what I say, despite whether it's true or not. I have to put my flag in the ground so that, and I just think that's a tough spot to be in, and I'm going to ask you a really big question that's really not fair to you, but I know you'll have at least one or two things to say, but if someone's listening to this and they're like, wow, you're right, there aren't a lot of resources for dads out there, and I would argue there's not a lot of honest, truthful, transparent resources for parents in general. But if you had to give a dad one piece of advice, like not necessarily how to be a great dad, but one piece of advice that would encourage him to seek resources, or one piece of encouragement, I guess would be better than advice. Is there anything that you would offer that would say, here's what I've learned, here's why I started Dadhood, here's where you can go, here's what obviously they can go to Dadhood, but here's what you should seek to help you. What would be your advice?
Yeah. What a question, Kevin. I constantly am asking myself, and my boys are 10 and 9 at this point. I ask myself constantly, what if I was 10 or 9, what dad would I want showing up in this moment? And then I have to weigh that against how I actually am showing up. I have to be truthful with myself. And if I'm not showing up that way, I only have two choices: keep doing what's not working, or put in the hard effort to try to fix that behavior, or fix. And I don't want to use the word fix because I don't think we're broken. I just don't think we have the tools. We don't have the tools. And watching a video on YouTube of a dad telling everybody, hey, spend all the time with your kids because you're going to lose it. Like, okay, fine. That's great. Or the dad saying, like, got to be alpha male in order to teach these kids. Great, whatever. Again, these are just like individuals I feel like constantly we're getting spoke at, but we're not really unpacking if that's our truth. So having to really sit down and ask yourself those hard questions. What is my truth? How do I want to show up as a dad? Not how your dad showed up, not how the neighbor shows up for his kids, not how you show up for your son, Kevin, but like, how does Thomas want to show up for Liam and Jackson? And what do Liam and Jackson really need from their dad? And then just trying to provide that, because it's not the things, bro. It's not the things. It's not even the vacations. It's not even the mass amount of time I feel like I spend with them now. Because I did a little test with that with 15 minutes each day of real quality time versus the quantity time. And what I found out was at the end of that 15 minutes, they weren't upset like, hey, let's keep playing. They were just so grateful that I gave them my undivided attention for 15 minutes and I stepped into their world and didn't expect them to come into mine.
Yeah.
But again, I wouldn't have seen that if I wasn't able to stop and try to look at me through their lens. If I wasn't able to sit there and be like, wow, man, how I just showed up in that moment, I see in your eyes that was hurtful. Or I see in your eyes that wasn't the same way that you look at some of these influencers online. Or the same way you even look at your friends or some of these other people, and identifying some of that, like trying to look through their lens, man. And then once you work on those skills in order to show up, because you are their dad for a reason, period.
Yeah.
You are Bax's dad 100% because that's what Bax needed in his life.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean Kevin can't show up a little different for Bax. Doesn't mean I can't show up different for Liam and Jackson. But I am the dad that they need in this life. So, man, I want to show up as that best version for them.
Ooh. Yeah. You never fail when I think I've asked an impossible question to show up with the impossible answer, something that I didn't see coming. And that makes a very good point. So how can people get in touch with you? Where can we find you? I know you're very active all over the place. Dadhood.co is the website.
Yeah.
That's
social handles. That's everything,
yeah,
man. That's
everything.
Instagram, TikTok. It's all Dadhood.co. And one thing I would love, if your listeners do decide for some reason to go check out Dadhood, keep sending honest feedback or critique back on the videos. If you're not finding the value in it, or you don't think I've scratched or gone past the surface level, do us all a favor and express that to me, because I want to give more. This is a passion project. This isn't a show up just to collect a paycheck project.
Yeah. And I will say, I watch your videos, and I don't think anyone's accused you of staying on the surface for very long. Some videos are fun, but they always have a good meaning. So, Thomas, thank you for being here. Sit tight, man, because I do want to chat with you after this. But we'll put all the links in the show notes: TikTok, Instagram, Dadhood.co is the website. Thomas McMinn, founder of Dadhood, extraordinary person. I think an extraordinary dad. He would say, "I'm trying to be a good dad." But connect with him. he's a great resource for you if you're a parent in general, but especially if you're a dad. So thanks for being here, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
What a powerful conversation with Thomas. Thomas, thank you so much for being here. If you want to go deeper and connect with Thomas, be sure to check out everything he's doing over at www.dadhood.co. He's building something truly transformational for men and dads everywhere. And if today's episode stirred something in you, if you're ready to create real momentum in your life and business without burning out, then I want to personally invite you to join the Momentum Mastermind at coachkevinhoover.com. It's where high-achieving people come to grow, get clarity, and build aligned success together. Thanks for listening. This is Hustle to Harmony, and we'll see you next time.